Anyway, so welcome to those of you mochurch.tv. If you live in the Cleave-Land area, we'd love to have you come hang with us in person. So how many of you are fans of the 90s classic sitcom Seinfeld? Anyone? There we go, okay. So yeah, there's a classic iconic, they have many iconic episodes with catchphrases, but one of them, there's a time where Elaine, the main female character, is thinking about sleeping with her latest boyfriend. His name's Billy. And her preferred birth control is no longer available. It's been taken off the market. Today's Sponge. And so she freaks out in a panic. She goes all over the west side of Manhattan checking every drugstore. So she finally finds a drugstore that has one case left. And she's like, all right, I'll take 5 of them. And he's like, all right. And he starts to turn around. She said, that's just, all I need is 10. So he goes to starts like, I'm going to take 20 and then I'm gone, Then finally, she's like, okay, give me all 60. Give me the case. So he gives her the case, and so she goes home. And so a couple days later, she's talking to Jerry Seinfeld, the main character of the show, and she mentions that she had a date night kind of with Billy the night before, and she mentions that she didn't sleep with Billy. And so she says, Jerry's like, man, why didn't you sleep with him? And basically Elaine says, well, I just couldn't decide if he was really sponge-worthy. And Jerry asks, sponge-worthy? And so you're like, yeah, Jerry, I have to conserve the sponges. And he says, very telling, but you really like this guy. Like, isn't that what the sponges are for? And she says, yes, but that was before they went off the market. Now I got to really reevaluate my entire screening process. Like, I can't afford to waste any of them. I get 60 of them. So later in the episode, she sits down with glasses and a clipboard and a pen, and she says to Billy, so you think you're sponge-worthy? I think I'm very sponge-worthy. I'm very sponge-worthy. She says, okay, run down your case for me again. And so he starts saying, well, obviously we have a good rapport. I own a very profitable business. I eat well. I exercise. Blood tests immaculate. She says, what are you going to do about the sideburns? I'm going to trim the sideburns. Okay. And so she throws down the clipboard and says, let's go. And they head to the bedroom. And so the funny thing is two episodes later, I hate it when, there's shows that stand alone and maybe something new is established in the show, but they never refer to it again, ever again. And so I love that they have a callback. 2 episodes later, Jerry and Elaine are talking at the beginning of the episode. Now she's dating a different guy who's like a professional saxophone player. And just randomly at the beginning of the episode, Jerry says, but is he sponge-worthy? And she goes, oh, yeah. I was like, yes, callback, okay? Not enough shows do that. And so, the idea is this. All of us have to admit, no matter how much or little of a church background that you have, all of us have to admit sex has a screening process. There is some level of a screening process. Who would you have sex with, or who would you or should you say no to when it comes to sex? And so the deal is we got 2 options. We either create our own standard, we either create our own screening process. What are my filters for who would or wouldn't have sex with? And it might be, like Jerry was kind of saying, it might be, I really like them. Well, then why wouldn't you use a sponge on that person? If you really like them, of course, why wouldn't you have sex with them if you like them? Other people, it's a little bit more. It's like, I got to love them. I have to have crossed the threshold where I feel like I love the person, and that's their screening process. Some people, it might just be the moment was right. It could be the first time I've ever met them, but the moment felt right, and it was romantic, whatever it was. Or I just wanted to. I needed my emotional or my sexual needs fulfilled, and so I just wanted, or some people, we were together 3 months or 6 months or whatever. Some people, hey, we weren't related, whatever. It took a while to get to that part of the room over there. It's like, wow, intelligence, and then it's like, so there's that. We either come up with our own screening process, whatever that is, whatever, high or low filter, and then on the other side, there's this other option that some of you have considered, is just like, or we accept God's loving authority over our lives. If he's the creator of the world, he owns everything. He made it. We owe our breath to God. And we accept his loving authority over our lives, and we let him, we say, God, okay, I place my life at your feet. I'm going to let you be my screening process. I'm going to let you call the shots in this. And this is one of the most difficult things in life and in faith to do, is to say, it isn't just my birthright that I can get to have sex whenever I want to. God, who would you say that I'm allowed to have sex with, or who would I say no to? And so the question then is, what is God's standard or expectation? Why did he create sex? What was it intended for? Because it's not something the devil came up with. God created sex, okay? And so Genesis chapter 1, this is where we've been in this series called Love in Cleave-Land. And so we're going to look at like Genesis 1 and 2 today and jump around a little bit. But God created the first man, Adam. He created the first woman, Eve. But when God created Adam first and Adam was alone, God said, not good. This is not good. Like there's no community. There's no, love between human beings. There's none of that. So God created Eve. And it says in Genesis 1:27, God created mankind in his own image. Male and female, he created them. And in verse 28, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And so verse 31, it says, God saw all that he had made. And that wasn't it. There's other things mentioned. But it says that he saw all that he made and it was very good. And I just want to submit to you, if you are from like a more prudish church background or no background at all, I really want to make it important. It's important to point out, part of what God declared very good was sexuality, what he created. And so at the end of that, he created male and female. He says, be fruitful and multiply, have babies who have babies who have babies, fill the earth, it says. And it says he declared it very good. So he declares and writes down, man, I've created sex. It is very good. I've created sexuality. It is very good. Then, Genesis chapter 2, this is all recorded, written by Moses, the first 5 books, the Pentateuch of the Bible, and inspired by the Holy Spirit in light of the creation of man and woman. This is the verse we've been camping out on. It says, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. So the series has been largely around the Hebrew word for united in that verse, which is the Hebrew verb that means to cling to stick to hold fast to, and in the case of humans, another person, and to bond together so tightly that the two become one unit. And the old King James version of that verse says, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave onto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. So in marriage, a person is supposed to leave and cleave. And that Hebrew verb, it's very important here because it means to be bonded, and the idea that Hebrew word has high sexual connotation. Like the idea to become one and to unite and to be bonded, there's high sexual connotation in that word. One of the most tangible ways that you unite and cleave is by bonding sexually, consummating the marriage through sex. I mean, when you think about it, like it's easy for us to read the Bible and to, sterilize things by turning the people in these scenes into cartoons in our mind. But when you think about Genesis 1 and 2, God says it's not good for man to be alone. And then he brings the naked man, a naked woman, and he presents them to each other. And in Genesis 2, the naked man sings an erotic hymn of joy and says in delight, this at last is flesh of my flesh. It's the first woman, and she's naked and I'm naked, and God was like, it was very good, and I made that. I created. It wasn't like he was like, oh crap, I forgot to give them clothes, and hey, man, woman, what? They're in the bushes. What are you guys doing? What are you doing over there? I did not know that could happen. That's not how God, he created sex and said, I declare this is very good. This is my plan, not Satan's. Quit giving him credit for something that I made and I created. And so God unites them physically and spiritually through the gift of sex, and they're bonded. They're gorilla glued. I mean, that's the point. It's like we are bonded together, and it's like meaning you're meant to be one and a permanent unit and one flesh. That is sex in Cleave-Land. And so, I mean, you think about gorilla gluing some stuff together. Like, that's a bonding. That is like something that is meant to stick and to stay. And so I just got to say, like, the Bible gives us this understanding of sex that's unparalleled in any other religious book or philosophy. Absolutely unparalleled. Like, it's lofty, high, nosebleed view of sex. Like, this is very good. And it's not like God saw it as some oops mistake, like, dang it, I gave this gift and I wish I could take it back. And so aside from simply procreation, from the multiplying and having babies, God intended sex to be this towering joy that carries the heavy freight of both physical union and spiritual union for a husband and a wife. I mean, that's a lot of freight that is carried by this act, this activity that happens. And so the reason why God has set aside sex for the context of marriage is because it was designed, the way he designed it was this bonding, this gorilla glue, if you will, to bind you together physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. And it would happen through this physical act of sex that most of us intuitively know it's more than just physical. There's something otherworldly, there's something sublime, there's something transcendent about sexual activity. And so it's not just a physical act, it involves more than just the body. It was meant to involve the whole person. It was meant to not just be a physical thing, but to involve the giving of all of me to you and you to me. I mean, isn't it interesting that humans are the only creatures that can relate sexually face to face? Now, I'm not saying you're limited to that, but I'm just saying, okay? You're the only creatures who can relate sexually face to face. And it means this is the union of persons, not just bodies. This is the union of it's connection, it's fun, and it's intimate. Like, all those things are God-given. It's body oneness and it's soul oneness. Now, here's a little birds and bees lesson for you, okay? You guys look like you need that. All right? But I think this is simple yet profound. That God created the man, he created the male gender to be convex. And he created the woman, the female gender, to be concave. And I mean, when you really think about the simplicity, but the complexity of all that entails, like, then God presents them to one another, and lo and behold, they fit. Like, it's beautiful and it's profound. They fit together. And so, like the newest Apple cable and the newest Apple port, they go together. You know, you're not like, oh man, it used to fit, but it doesn't anymore. Like, they go together. They're meant. They're created for one another. They fit. You know, medically, we're going to get into the terms now. Medically, the scientific terms for what fits is it's the pee-pee and the hoo-hoo. You know, that's what I got her during coffee. She was in mid-coffee. That was so awesome. Yesterday, no joke, I won't name names, but there was a Momentum family I was with and a Momentum kid who had a little like suction dart gun or whatever, and he shot it at me. He goes, I hit you in the butt. And he shot another person that was with me and goes, I hit him in the peeper. And the parents are like, oh no, here we go with the peeper. Because when you're a parent, you got to call it something, you know, or whatever. And so, man, but you put the concave and the convex together, and they fit. They fit. And it's so, like, men and women are different. And it's because of those differences that they fit. And only together can they be fruitful and multiply. But here's the cool thing about it. So male and female marriage partners, not only an exact fit physically and sexually, bodily, but their maleness and their femaleness fill out and complete each other and broaden their horizons. And I don't mean every woman is exactly the same and every man is exact. But you know what I mean? It's like their maleness and their femaleness fill out or complete one another in every respect. And it's that old thing of men are from Mars, women are from Venus. There's a way that women think differently than men, and men generally think differently than women. And the two unite sexually and they become one. And there's something mysterious and even confusing when you're in middle school or whatever, or when you're in your 40s, about the other sex, that you're like, it's mysterious and it's confusing, but at the same time, it's that very difference. And those concave, convex, and emotional and intellectual differences, all those things are like mysteriously different and exactly the thing that attracts us, right? Like, they're so different than me, and their parts are so different too, and all of that is very attractive to me, and the way that they think and see things, it's so different. And in a good, healthy marriage, a husband has the opportunity to see and understand the issues of the world through the eyes of his wife's feminine eyes, and her through her husband's masculine eyes, like looking at things in a totally different way and perspective, the way that two human beings would. But even these two human beings are even more different than any random just... So my wife, has brought a whole bunch of empathy and beauty and just decor and wisdom into my life. In the Bible, wisdom is feminine, book of Proverbs. And so there's so many of those things that she has brought into my life where I was really rough around the edges, needed my horizons broadened to become more sensitive and understanding. All these things that she brought into it. And I've brought a whole lot of NFL football and pranks and workout equipment and hip-hop with great 808s into her life. Well, I know y'all wanted that 808. All right, so, so that's, we fill one another out and help complete one another with that kind of union that's together emotionally and psychologically, all that stuff. But God expects, and so when you get to like, God, what is your screening process? God creates Adam, he creates Eve, and it's like he presents them as husband and wife, which is clear in like Genesis 2. Is like, here you guys go. You guys are a pair. You're a one. You're a unit together. And so he expects this bonding, this gorilla gluing together. He expects it to happen under full life, whole life commitments. Like, okay, we're making this commitment to, we would call it the wedding vows, those marriage promises. And so we make these promises of like, I am yours forever. No matter what, even when my emotions are up and down, I'm yours forever. You are mine forever. Those are kind of exchanged. And then we bond. And that makes complete sense, doesn't it? Like, no matter what you've, experienced, what you've done, there makes some sense there. Like, we're going to give ourselves to one another wholly. Then we're going to bond. And God has created sex to be that magic bonding that puts us together permanently. And it's like we need this other person to kind of promise and totally commit to us. And we need them to say, as we say to them, I see everything about you. I've seen the bedhead. I've seen your nasty little temper at times. I've seen whatever it is. I've seen your messiness. I've seen your, anal retentiveness, wanting to control things. I know all these things. So up and down in my emotions when we have, conflict and all that kind of stuff, I see everything about you and I love you forever. I'm committed to loving you forever. I see your flaws and I will love you to the bottom. That's what we all want, in a sense, is to say, you will see me fully naked, whether literal or metaphorical. You'll see me naked and say, I will love you forever. And that's the context of, under those promises, those vows, then we unite spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And so to say, I'm completely, utterly, permanently committed to you, and that can only happen when there's a union of both soul and body. And those things happen together at once through the sexual act. So I think one of the most beautiful love songs in the last several years has been John Legend's All of Me. Like, it's just such a beautiful song, but I love the way he articulates it, because honestly, most pop songs aren't poetic, and this is a song that's actually poetic. Like, there was thought and time put into it. He didn't just smoke a joint and start writing the lyrics, And so like, man, this is beautiful. So it says, because all of me loves all of you, loves your curves and all your edges, all your perfect imperfections. Give your all to me, I'll give my all to you. That's the idea here. Is like, under this commitment of, I'm not going anywhere. I promise. And under those wedding vows, now we unite because we are meant to stay united. And so, very simply for God's idea for this, the screening process or what have you, is that marriage is for life and that sex is for marriage. Like it was meant to be, this is the bonding, the sealing that happens once a man and a woman come together to be married. And so what does that look like to be physically and spiritually united and to bond in that way? Well, interesting, there's just this little tidbit in Proverbs 2:17, where it describes a person's spouse as their partner, the partner of their youth. In the Hebrew, it describes that it's their halup, which really, if you look that up in a Hebrew nerd lexicon, halup means your counselor, your best friend, your chief friend, or your most trusted advisor. So that's pretty profound for the ancient world. Like this idea that your spouse is your best friend is very, very modern. Like that isn't the way people in the ancient world looked at their spouse, okay? And so the idea that in Proverbs 2, your spouse is called your halup, that's very unusual. And so the idea is like, wow, I need to have this deep friendship, this spiritual union with the person I want to be with the rest of my life. And so then you go 5 chapters later, Proverbs chapter 5. If I was wearing short sleeve, you'd see my 5 here. It's totally for Proverbs chapter 5 because here it comes. It's coming. So the same man is being instructed in this passage as Proverbs 2, and he's told that he must be ravaged by his wife's body. Like it needs to intoxicate him, his focus on her, the wife of his youth. And so it says, may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. May her breasts satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated or drunk with her love. And this is this beautiful poetry just to say, man, that is what the marriage relationship is supposed to be. She's my best friend, but I am also intoxicated by the romance that I experience with her. It's not just, we have this prudish relationship where we're married and we do finances together and all that kind of stuff or whatever. No, there needs to be some passionate love in that marriage. My best friend, and I respect her more than anybody else in this world, but also, man, am I attracted to her. And I pursue her, and the romance is in the pursuit. So we pursue one another. It's both of those things. It's the spiritual union and the physical union of husband and wife. Back in 2020, Candace Cameron Bure, who's known, well, 1 for Full House, but 2 for Hallmark movies, used to be, now she's moved on. But she basically is a very outspoken Christian, and in 2020, when she was 44 years old, she's followed Jesus. She posted some pics of her and her husband, who's an ex-NHL player, Val Bure, and they were standing on like a little footbridge, and she posted a couple of pictures on social media, and she has a huge following. And so in one of those pics, he's kissing her, smooching her on the cheek, and it's very sweet. And in like the next pic, when you flip through the slides or whatever, he has his arm around her and his hand is on her boob. And she posted the picture, and the caption she put in the picture was, "Sweet and spicy, 24 years and counting." And a bunch of her followers are, fans, and all that kind of stuff of her being on TV. But a lot of them are Christians. Well, some of them also are just maybe not Christians, but Hallmark, the sweet cutesiness and all that kind of stuff of Hallmark stuff. Excuse me. Whoa, I didn't mean for that to come up. It was like the coffee you had a second ago. But anyways, she posts this, and she got some backlash saying that those photos were inappropriate. She was like, that's my husband. She was like, we've been married for 24 years. And so she actually responded, her response to people saying it was inappropriate, whether they were Christians or not. She said, he can touch me anytime he wants, and I hope he does. She said, this is what a healthy, good marriage and relationship is all about. And then later in her Instagram story, she nearly took her comments back, but ultimately decided to double down saying, I'm sorry if I offended you. I'm actually not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. She basically said, I'm glad that we have fun together after so many years, and he can touch me all day long. And so I was like, man, that's beautiful, because it's not enough to be your spouse's friend. It's not just hey, we have this business relationship. We'll win better financially, and it'll be good for the kids if we're together. It'll be all these things. No, it's not just the friend, although that is there, but it's also your spouse has got to be your lover. You got to chase after them and put energy into romancing them and pursuing them. Ecstatic sex needs to be a part of your marriage, and that's what this is about. She's like, man, we have both of those things. Sorry if it offends you. And so it can't be done with one without the other. You know, it's friendship without passion or passion without friendship. You know, it is Proverbs 5, be intoxicated by the breasts of the wife of your youth. And so one of my rejected titles for this message was Cleavage in Cleave-Land. Leavage and cleavage. Leave it to cleavage. I don't know. So anyways, I didn't make that joke at 8 o'clock service because I didn't want my wife to come up to me and be like, cut that. All right. So one thing you can't talk about biblical sex without bringing up the book Song of Songs or Song of Solomon in the Bible. So if you don't know, if you're new to the scriptures, there is a book of the Bible that is only about sex. And for years, for centuries, there were scholars that were like, well, it's more of an allegory. What it means is it's representing the relationship of God pursuing us and the love that he has for his church. Shut up. Finally, in the last century, most scholars are like, it's about sex. Like, get over yourselves, people. It's about sex. You really have to do some acrobatics to make this not a book that's just completely about a husband and wife who are enjoying the sex that they have together and the gift that God has given them of each other and of sex and of their relationship. And so it's a beautiful book. But what's funny is I haven't seen many modern translators who translate it from Hebrew to English who are really willing to tell you what some of the things say in the Song of Solomon. The funny thing is I'm talking old, respectable, like these are scholars who know what it says, and they'll say it in a lecture, or might mention it in an article or whatever, but they won't write it in like a commentary, like a book where it's permanent, because they're like, do I really want to be known for the one that kind of put that out there, you know? And so, for instance, like in a song that's a prelude to lovemaking, this is a song of foreplay. The husband says to his wife in chapter 7, how beautiful you are and how pleasing my love with your delights. Your stature is like that of the palm. Your breasts are like clusters of fruit. I said, I will climb the palm tree. I will take hold of its fruit. May your breasts be like clusters of grapes on the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and your mouth is like the best wine. So it's a song of foreplay. Then the woman also, throughout the book, it goes back and forth. She sings a song of foreplay to her husband. And this is the wife talking to her husband, chapter 5. She says this, my beloved is radiant and ruddy, outstanding among 10,000, the old translation, the fairest among 10,000. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. His arms are rods of gold. His body is like polished ivory. His legs are pillars of marble. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is altogether lovely. And then she finishes by saying, this is my beloved or my lover. This is my friend. Now, that's beautiful. The Hebrew translators just can't bring themselves to tell you what this is actually saying. And so she looks at him and she sees everything about him as sexy and attractive. And it literally translates in the middle of that in chapter 5, his belly, his abdomen is like an ivory tusk. It's a phallic symbol. She is looking at her naked husband and his sexually aroused body and saying, man, I desire him so much. He's ruddy, he's strong, he's beautiful, but he's my lover and my friend and all this. And so she sings a song of praise about his body. And so the Bible, it's a very uncomfortable book for the prudish. Like if you're a prude, you're like, how can I walk out right now? Is there a way I can use the restroom and not come back? But because this stuff is in Scripture, and so we sterilize it, and we're like, but at the end of her song, though, I love that she says, this is my lover and my friend. It's both the union of body and the union of soul or spirit. Like, this is the connection. It's all the connection. It's ecstatic sex. It's best friend. It's emotional connection. It's intellectual sharing. It's all these things. And man, if that seems unusual to you, I am not trying to defend whatever some church taught you when you were a kid or whatever you think the church does teach us. This is biblical sexuality. And it is rampant throughout Scripture of like, man, God created sex and says, it is good. It is very good. But this is what I created it for, was to bond you permanently for life to one person. And that's why it's so powerful and so beautiful. And so sex is a joy that happens through the consummation of an absolute union of body and soul. So when you continue reading in Genesis after chapter 1 and 2, you get to chapter 3, and that's what we call the fall of mankind. And that's where man and woman sin against God. We say, we know best. We'll do what we want. We think you're holding out on us. Like, there's stuff that we want to know that you're not letting us know. There's stuff that we want to be and feel and all that kind of stuff. And so mankind rebels against God. And ever since then, the vulnerability that Adam and Eve shared, they were naked together. All of a sudden, that became shame in chapter 3. And then all of a sudden, it went from joy and love being marred by pain and lust and domination and all this stuff. And so sexuality has been warped in our humankind, in our world. And so now there are all these deviant sexual practices that you see them through the rest of the books of Moses, the Pentateuch. You see narratives about, things like polygamy. And you see laws and rules given, like sexually, like here are moral laws about, remember, I created this for a man and a woman in marriage. And you get these narratives that make it really clear. Polygamy does nothing but bring heartache and destruction. And so polygamy and sex outside of marriage and adultery and seduction and incest and rape and homosexual acts and bestiality and prostitution. It just goes on and on and on and on. And it's all clear in the narrative and in the context of what God says. No, this is the filter. No, this is not what it's designed for. This is a bonding. This is a bonding and all this stuff. And so anything outside of the union of that one man and that one woman in marriage is a broken version of God's blueprint. And so when you look through the book of Genesis after chapter 1 and 2, like Exodus and Leviticus, I mean, those are only the second and third books. Most of it reads like a tabloid magazine. I mean, when you read through Genesis, you'd be like, that's not even where I would recommend starting if you're new to the Bible. I would start with Jesus in the book of Matthew in the New Testament. But if you were reading in Genesis and you've covered the Jesus stuff, you'd be like, what is this Jerry Springer trash that's happening the entire time through Genesis? You're like, what the flip? And it's because humanity is just broken. And here's the reason I'm telling you all this, is just simply this, is like, I know what it can be like to be like, okay, I heard a preacher talk about what it should be and all this kind of stuff. But I want to make it really clear to you, we are all sexually broken. I mean, as soon as we live in a life that we think we know best and we say, God, I'm gonna come up with my own filter, I'm going to come up with my own screening process, I'm going to do things my way, in any kind of way, then we're separated from God. Our relationship with him is broken, and our relationships with one another in Genesis chapter 3, they're broken. And so all of us are broken sexually, and when we broke our relationship with God, everything became broken. It's why there's so much chaos in all the ways, social and sexually and all that stuff. In our world, our peace, our personal peace is broken and all that. But we are all sexually broken. And here's the thing, some of us are broken in a way that we want sex more than we should, for connection or to medicate for the pain that we feel or because we're addicted eventually. But some of us are broken in ways that we don't want sex at all or very often. And so there's different ways that different people here are broken, but all of us are broken. In some way or another, all of us are broken. Last week I talked about how it takes two healthy people to create a healthy marriage. It takes two healthy people to create a healthy marriage. And the same is true of a healthy sex life in your marriage. It takes two healthy people. And so to be healthy sexually, it's going to take, first, essential spiritual healing that can only come through Jesus, that can only come through your Creator to say, I know you are broken, and I want to make you whole again. I want to heal you, And I know that your heart and your mind have been affected in so many ways by what you've experienced in life, but I want to heal you, and that can only come through Jesus. But then there's other things like maybe spiritual mentoring or what's called discipleship from a mature Christian person or a mature Christian couple. Or it might take professional Christian therapy, like I mentioned last week also, but specifically in this area, if you've experienced trauma that's connected to sex or anything like that, man, it's going to take a professional to unpack that trauma with you in a way that's healthy and doesn't traumatize you more. And so there's ways that you have to work on slowly getting healthy so that the two people in the relationship can be sexually healthy. And so all of us have illegitimate desires. Like, man, this isn't what the context is, for sex. This is the context right here, what we've talked about. But all of us have desires that are illegitimate and for things that aren't in that context. All of us do. I mean, perfect example is, speaking of men, because I'm a man, most men think like polygamists. Like most men will tell you, I'm not made for monogamy. I'm not made for monogamy. Well, no, our perverted brains that are fallen are not made for monogamy. But that's the point but I understand that a loving God has authority over my life. And especially when I say, God, I want to follow you, make you my leader, my Lord, because I think you know best and you know how to heal me and you offer to heal me. I'm going to do my best to take every thought captive and in a marriage relationship to say, I'm going to hone all of my sexual thought and energy to one person that it was intended to be honed in on, and to say, I'm going to try to, to deal with that illegitimate desire that I have for variety, or to be with different people, or to turn to pornography for my polygamy and the variety that I have. That nowadays our concubines are computers. And so to say, I'm going to try to take every thought captive and do what God instructs me, because he knows that this is what's best for my mind and my brain and my spirit and my marriage. And so most people, if we were to make up what the filter is, because we're a fallen humanity and society, what we would say, this is the screening process, is anything two consenting adults agree to, right? I mean, secretly or publicly, maybe some of you would say, that's what I think, as long as two consenting adults. But God's filters are like, no, I have so much better for you. Like, I have so much better. This is why I designed it this way, so that you wouldn't be broken and hurt through sex. Like, wouldn't you avoid a crap ton, or wouldn't you have avoided a crap ton of heartache in your life if you were like, I'm going to imperfectly try to do it all God's way? Wouldn't you have avoided a crap ton of heartache? And this is interesting. Last week I mentioned how Jesus validated what Moses had written in Genesis chapter 2. Jesus quotes it in Mark 10, and he validates it. He's like, yep, what was said originally about marriage, yes, man and a woman, here it is, they become one, all that stuff. Well, here's another one. In 1 Corinthians 6, the Apostle Paul, kind of a big deal also, not as big as Jesus, but kind of a big deal. He says this, do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute, is one with her in body? For it is written, notice what he's quoting here, the two will become one flesh. He's also quoting Genesis 2, but he's doing it in a way that's like, I acknowledge and understand what goes on in the world. People unite with people that aren't their spouse often, all the time, whatever. And so he's saying, don't you realize that when you unite with someone sexually, you bond with them? That's the power that God has created sex to be, that you gorilla glue yourself to them spiritually and physically, and that's the union that happens, and that's why it's only meant to be shared by a husband and a wife. And so here's the deal. When you gorilla glue two objects together that you didn't want to stay stuck together, and then you pull them apart, whether that is because, it was a hookup, or whether it was because after a while it was a breakup, or after 25 years it was a divorce, what happens is you've been gorilla glued to this person physically and spiritually, so there's a tearing that takes place. And most of us feel that sense of tearing. And it's like, it isn't two holes that go, it isn't two ones that go off in their separate directions. It's torn bits and pieces of like, man, I feel like half of a person. I feel like 9/10 of a person, because there's bits and pieces left behind when we tear apart what God intended to never be torn apart. And that's why we're spiritually wounded and emotionally hurt and broken. And so anytime we glue together something that we didn't want to be stuck together, when we try to get those objects unstuck, there's a tearing, and one or both of them is torn in that process. And I think even our language, it betrays that. You know, have you ever said or thought, I was with him for a while, I was with her for a while, we broke up, and when they left me, it was like a piece of me went with them. And I think that betrays, we understand there is a spiritual connection. Or even the more crass, I want to get a piece of that. It's just another way that it gets to, man, this is what happens, that tearing. Now, here's the deal. And the good news is this, and I love this little story, is in John chapter 4, Jesus is at a well. He's at a well where a woman is drawing water. And they're there together, and as she's drawing water, he says to her, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. Now, I think this is interesting because today in their slang, our connotation for thirsty means they're sexually hungry, like they're after it. And so he says, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but the water that I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. Like I will give them unlimited life and joy, not just length of life, but quality of life in this earth. I give people eternal life. And then he says, I have this eternal water to give. She says, really? Let me have that water. And he says, okay, go get your husband. And she says, I don't have a husband. He says, you're right when you say that you don't have a husband. You've had 5 husbands, and the man that you're living with right now isn't your husband. Now, here's an interesting question. When Jesus is talking about eternal life, and she's asking for eternal life, why in the heck does he bring up her sex life? Where does that, it just looks like a right turn in the middle of the conversation. Why? And I think this is what he's trying to say. You have been going to men to get what only I can give you. I'm your God. I'm God in the flesh. I'm the one who loves you to the bottom, knows everything about you, but still loves you to the bottom. Still pursuing. I showed up here on earth to pursue you. And I think that's what he's saying is like, you've been going to men to find this, and you're never going to be completed from that because first and foremost, what you want and what you need is a relationship with God. It's a relationship with Jesus. And the good news about going to Jesus is suddenly the past becomes the past. You get a new life, and anyone who puts faith in Jesus doesn't wear a scarlet letter. You go to Jesus, and he makes you, it says, you get robes of white. You get robes of righteousness, and you are made clean. Let me end with this video story of some friends of mine at Momentum. One of the coolest stories of faith, trust, obedience that I've heard from a couple at Momentum in the years that Momentum has existed. Check it out.